So Strappy is, as I said, it's an API that I shouldn't say API. It's an app that creates an API for you. And I'll just pull up the website so you can kind of see what Strappy Io is all about. The reason I love Strappy is it's number one, it's free and you can't beat free. You can host it anywhere you want. So I'll show you kind of where you can host it on Heroku. But there's DigitalOcean that you can also host it on. You can host it on your own server. You can do whatever you want with Strappy. That's to me, pretty powerful. It's super easy once you have terminal set up and you have the basic stuff installed. Full disclosure, when I installed this on my M1 Mac Mini, it took a little longer than it did on my laptop. There was stuff that just wouldn't install, and it took me a little time. But once it gets installed, it's pretty simple. So I will show you what I mean by that. All you have to do in terminal to create a Strappy project is run this command. And I'm hoping that this is big enough for you to see. So here we're going to create a Strappy app, and we're going to call it, and the project's going to be my Strappy project. So this my-strappy-project is the folder that it creates, and I'm doing a quick start. There are tons of different ways to create the project. You can create one that has data in it. You can create one that's empty. You can create all kinds of different things. But this one in particular is just a basic quick start. And all I have to do is hit return. And now it creates the app. And this will take a few seconds to install. But once it's installed, technically my API is ready to go. Now, there are other solutions out there, but for me, Strappy gives me the customization I need and allows me to do a lot of the things that I can't do. I don't have to worry about Firebase. I don't have to worry about, I'm sorry, not Firebase, but spit the name out. I even have it mentally blocked in my head, WordPress. So what's great about this is we have the ability to really get up and running quickly. In my full-time job, we started this sprint 2 weeks ago. We had pretty much everything ready to go, and it's fully up now, and we're in week 2. But it was ready in week 1. Week 2 really was putting it together and integrating some of the stuff and fixing and tweaking things. But overall, it's really easy to get started. And as you see, it'll launch an admin and it's building its last bit of stuff that it needs. And then once it's finished, we will have our admin and everything on localhost. Now, all of this is going to be done on localhost. Once you're done with localhost, you can then deploy it anywhere you want. In my case, Heroku is pretty much what I've used. And of course, okay, so here it says port 1337 is in use, and that's because I'm using it over here. So I need to, oops, Control C. I need to cancel it. And let's CD into the project. So this is CD my Strappy return, and then we should be able to say yarn develop. And now we can run it. Sorry about that. So that's the only thing I have another one running at the same time. So that's why I got that error. Typically, if I had done it right, it would have launched this page and into a browser. And you would see something like this once you're done. So here it's just to create an account. And don't forget your password, because if you do, you have to reinstall the whole thing again. So I'm going to put in everything I need and my email. Don't spam me. All right, so we're going to get, it won't let me do. And passwords don't match. Gotta love that when you're nervous and typing. It's simple. Now, okay. So this is what Strappy looks like when you log in and you're here. It creates users for you, and we'll kind of touch more on that later. But really what I wanted to show you is we have what's called collection types, and we have a media library. And in here, you can upload and drop in images and photos. Now, when Sierra created her project first, she actually was able to create a demo project that had images and photos in there. Mine didn't, and I integrated S3. So I'll talk further about that when I come back. But this is basically the idea of creating a collection and creating an actual user. So if we wanted to create new collection types, we would basically go, let's go back to here. We're going to create our first collection type, and let's call it a blog. And we'll hit continue. And now you can just put in what you want for your blog. So we'll say title, and then we'll hit add another field. We'll say we want to add an image. So we'll do media, and we'll just say image. And then, well, you can do multiple or single. So in this case, we'll just do single. And then we'll add another field. We'll call it rich text. And then we'll actually say what the, let's say content here. I'm just making this up. And then I'm going to hit finish. So now we have a blog object that we have. We have a blog object with title, image, and content. And all we have to do is save. And of course it breaks, which is not a big deal, but that's basically how you set up your content. And why it didn't save, it's still there, which is really weird. Let's refresh. All right, so here we now see blogs and we see users. And now if I go add new blog, I can then add a title, add some text, come here, upload an asset, hit save, hit publish, and now this blog is live. And so to see this, if I wanted to see this actual as an API, all I would do is just do localhost /blogs. And right now you get this forbidden. So that's kind of what this talk's going to be. We want to keep it locked down. We don't want people to access it. But if you wanted to, you can go into your settings in your permissions, roles, let's see, public. And let's say we want to do find one, and that's good enough. So we'll say save. And then if I go here and I hit refresh, there's my blog. It's in an array. I'll add another one just to kind of show you that it shows multiple. Here, save, publish, and right now I have one, and if I refresh, I have two. So this is like super quick, super understanding of what you can do with Strappy. What we're going to do now is I'm going to let Sierra take over, and she's going to basically go over some of the things you can do as far as integrating Firebase into the app. So instead of me unlocking the settings, we'll leave it locked, and then we'll use auth. Once Firebase basically authorizes the login, they'll be able to access all of the content. So that's one of a couple of different ways you can use Strappy. So I'm going to let her take over from this point, and then I'll come back and show you everything she's showing you, but from the iOS side. And if you have questions, drop them in the chat, because I'll be looking at those and I can answer while she's talking. All right. Sierra, it's all yours.
Woohoo! Let's talk one. Let's share. Okay. Gotta move all your heads so I can see my notes. Thanks, Craig, for giving that introduction for this. So something that everyone should probably know about me is I'm really lazy. I know that there are a lot of people from Women Who Code on this call, on this part of the call, and that might be surprising given how much I do, but like at my core, I'm a very lazy person. And so integrating Firebase into things is a great solution for me because I do not want to write code to securely store passwords or authenticate you. And so I'll just let Firebase handle that. And particularly for projects like these, like personal projects, because you get a lot of options out of the box with different auth providers and you don't have to manage any of that. It's also backed by Google, and whether that's good or not doesn't really matter. They already have all my passwords anyways. And I can throw it in projects like this essentially for free, which is really nice. Now, I'm sharing code. You might notice it's JavaScript code. And so what also probably shouldn't be a not so secret about me is I'm an Android developer. I understand and know Android and Kotlin. And so while I might be able to hack together some JavaScript, just take everything I say with a grain of salt. And so now that I have that quick introduction about me out of the way, let's go ahead and get started. So Craig showed us how to set up a basic Strapi project, which is awesome and great. And now we can talk about how to customize that project to fit some of our needs. So Strapi already knows how to authenticate users based on a token. We talked very high level about making users inside the Strapi dashboard. Firebase, on the other hand, knows how to make users and give us tokens. And so what we're going to talk about here is how to make this Firebase that can give us tokens talk to the Strapi that can take tokens and authenticate and let them work together to authenticate our users. Because Strapi already has this process built in, there's already a function that looks for a token and then uses that to authenticate our users. And we're able to really easily reuse that same function that already exists and then just customize it to fit our needs. That function for authentication lives inside the Strapi plugin user permissions, config policies, permissions.js. And that code's actually available right here in front of you. And so that's what we're looking at. And so again, not a JavaScript developer, but we can talk about what they're doing here on a kind of high level before we jump into what we're going to do at also a high level. So the first thing that they do is they just check to see if there's a user, and if that person's already authenticated, then we can just move on to the next thing and don't have to worry about any of the rest. Otherwise, we see this strapi.plugins, again, mentioning that that function lives inside this user permissions Strapi plugin, and they look for a token. Then they use that token to go out and look for the actual user. If anything goes wrong with that process, you get thrown into your catch to handle that error. You get outside of that and everything went great, awesome. Again, if they didn't find a user, you're handling some errors. And then once you have that user, you have a lot of different options inside your Strapi setup to decide what should happen next. For example, you can define roles and permissions for different people. And so then they do a bunch of checks around that. Do they have the right role? Do they have the right permissions? Are they blocked? Are they verified? All of these things. And if we get to the very bottom and nothing has stopped us from moving forward, then we again just call next and move on to the next thing. So now we understand that code from a very high level. And so to customize this code, as it turns out, is very easy so that we can use something like Firebase instead. And all we have to do is add a new permissions file into our own project. And so we're going to put that in our root extensions. Again, user permissions config policies permissions.js. And once you put that file inside that project, then the Strapi application will will instead use your function inside the same place instead of the core one that we just looked at. And you can add your own code in that to customize what should happen next. The next thing that we're going to look at is this bootstrap.js. In this step, we will verify the auth token using our Firebase admin SDK. Before we can start actually editing this bootstrap.js, we'll first need to install the Firebase admin SDK and also set up our Firebase project. So to install Firebase admin SDK, we can use npm or yarn on the command line. Since I knew Craig was also using yarn, I went ahead and added that command, which is very straightforward. Just yarn add firebase-admin, and then you're good to go. And so then we see in our bootstrap.js, the first thing that we do is require that Firebase admin is available to us. The next thing in our bootstrap.js is then to look for the service account key. Your Firebase service account key can be used to authenticate across multiple Firebase features, such as the database or the storage or authentication itself. And so this key and this service account we actually get from our Firebase project. And so the next thing that we're going to have to do is head out to Firebase and set up a new project. I've already set up my project, obviously, to do the rest of these steps. So we're here in my project overview. And so to go and get that service account key for any given project in Firebase, you go out to your project settings, and then there is a service account. And so the first thing that we need to do to get that key is just generate a new private key, download it. Now we have available to us and can pull it into our project. Conveniently enough, this code might look familiar if you paid enough attention on the last screen, is that this is really similar to what we just saw in our bootstrap.js. And so we can now head back over there. We have our key, we put it in our project, we require that and pull it into our bootstrap.js. And then we can use very similar code to what we just saw to initialize our app using this admin, adding that service account key. And now we have this admin globally available via the strappy.firebase. And by doing all of this inside our bootstrap.js, it means that will only get called once when Strappy isn't originally booted up. So now we're going to talk about actually customizing our permissions.js. And so we looked at the permissions.js that was just pulled directly from that user plugins. And now that we're inside our own permissions.js. So this is what we actually have access to. What you should immediately notice is that it looks really similar. So this is why I took the time to go through some of that code that we already looked at, or that we just looked at, just to give you a feel for what will be in this file is giving you that reminder that I did not write all of this. Most of it came from Strappy's authentication services already. And so we talked about a little high level, and we said, oh, we're going to go out and snag this plugin to look for these users. Now, if we're trying to use Firebase, that will fail because those users will not exist inside Strappy, and so they won't be able to find them. And so we'll be thrown into, we were in this try catch, and so we'll be thrown into that catch of catch to handle that error. And so that's where we're going to have to update our code so that we can use our Firebase tokens instead. And so inside this catch, we're going to add a new try catch. So we got our second try catch inside the catch of our first try catch. And so the first thing that we're going to do is now pull our token directly out of our header authorization. And so we get out our ID token. And now once that we have that token, we're going to use that globally available Firebase Authentication admin that we set up in our Bootstrap to get out our decoded token by calling this verify ID token. And once we have that, then we can just set up our user, decode that token to find our user ID. And then if all of that works, we're good to go. And we see that return await next, just like we saw at the bottom of this file for Strappy's implementation. And if that doesn't work, also, we again go into our error handling and move on. And so with just these couple lines of code in this much bigger file that again came from Strappy, that's all we really need to do to integrate Firebase Authentication into the Strappy side of our project. And with that, we can rerun it, keep going, that we can run and immediately start using it. And so that's exactly what we're going to do. Now we're going to jump over to an Android project written with Jetpack Compose and look at how we bring all of these pieces together inside a mobile application. I'm moving around a lot of things. So like all good Android projects, there's a lot of housekeeping to do before you actually are able to get started with anything. And so in this case, we again have to add our Android project out to our Firebase project so that these two things can talk to each other and that they know that they're related. So we will end up jumping back to our Firebase and adding a new app to Firebase is really straightforward. You add a new app. In my case, I would always pick Android, and then we have to register our application, and Firebase basically takes you through those steps. You pull your Android package name right from your application, can give it some kind of nickname, an optional signing certificate, which is really easy to snag if you run the signing report. And this will be helpful if you choose to integrate something like sign in with Google. The next thing that happens once you've registered that app is they hand you back a configuration file, your Google services, to pull into your application so that it knows that it's tied to Firebase. It'll give you your different dependencies that you're going to need to actually run the project, to be able to access all those different features of Firebase, and then you're pretty much good to go. So I have done all those steps in mine. And so in addition, I know that we're going to integrate Firebase Authentication specifically. So I have my platform dependency, and then I also add my authentication dependency as well, because I know that's what's coming. And in this particular example, we're specifically going to talk about just the basics of an email and password. And so this is the only dependency we need. And we should be good to go. Before we jump into the code, just a couple small tips about this particular project. It is written with a MVVM architecture. It's going to use our Jetpack Compose for UI and our Jetpack architecture components for the MVVM part, and then also help for dependency injection. So setting up the Firebase aspect of this project is, again, really similar to any other Android project. And so here we're going to jump into how we're actually going to set up some of those some of those Firebase calls. In our case, we're going to implement functionality to both sign in to an existing account and also create a new account. So for creating a new account, right here, we have this auth.create user with email and password, and it takes in two arguments, email and password, where auth is just our Firebase Auth object. And so we just get that by calling firebase.auth. Now, if you've ever worked with Firebase, you might know that Firebase really, really likes tasks. And as an Android developer, that immediately triggers flashbacks of dealing with async tasks. And while Firebase tasks are slightly different than a async task, RIP, they are equally as frustrating. With Firebase tasks, you have to add all your completion listeners, and you enter into what could potentially be a callback hell. Luckily, someone has already solved this problem for me, and so I chose to use the await. And await comes from a third-party dependency from JetBrains, the developers of Kotlin. And all it does, if you jump into it, is it's an extension function on this task, where this task is straight from Firebase, and it just wraps that task inside the suspend cancelable coroutine. And that lets things that have all these callbacks and completion listeners behave more like a coroutine. And so instead of having to set up a bunch of listeners, wait for those to be triggered, I can essentially treat it like any other suspend function and just call it and wait for my result to come back. This thing's right in my way. So if I go back into my authentication interactor, I have my auth create, await, and I just get my user back. And I basically do the exact same thing for sign in, auth sign in with email and password, await, and pull my user off that. Now, the thing that we actually need that is not yet here is that we need their token so that we can pass that in. And so the third and final function that we really have to implement is also getting their token from Firebase. And so to do that, I just snag my current user, call get ID token, I wait for that, and I pull that token off. And so now we can pull all these things together so that we have one single function that will go whether they're signing in or creating an account. And once we have that user go and get their token, save it in our authentication repository for future use, because we know we're going to need that to make our network calls, and return a Boolean to indicate successful authentication that I can use to update our state, go with the flow, pun intended, and update our UI and navigation. And so we see that inside our view model is we call our authentication repository, sign in, update our state, and we're good to go. So now we haven't talked at all about Strapi, and that's because we really had to talk about two separate integrations that happen to get pulled together at the end of this process. So first, we need to talk about integrating Firebase and adding that authentication, and check, done, it's integrated. And second, we need to talk about actually integrating the Strapi backend. Now, as Craig mentioned, the really nice thing about Strapi is that it just exposes whatever RESTful API endpoints that you personally created. And we absolutely know how to handle RESTful APIs in Android. Nothing surprising here. And so we're just going to go ahead and be using retrofit to set up our Strapi backend endpoints so that we can use them inside our application. And so that's just going to follow the same process of setting up any other endpoint. I hope you can hear me. My internet just told me it was unstable. I will stop my video to try to save myself. So we're going to set up our product class, and I'm going wildly simple and just pulling the title off of that. And that's the only thing I'm going to have available to me. And then create a really simple interface for my Strapi service using all of our retrofit annotations to go and get my products for my Strapi backend. The one thing that we do notice here is that we're adding this authorization header, and this should immediately pull you back to what we talked about a little bit earlier. In that we're going to try to pull our token directly off that authorization header inside our Strapi backend. So here we are sending it to that backend so it can find it. And then with all of that set up, we pull all of this together again using Hilt for dependency injection to make our client, make our retrofit instance, and pull that all together to create our Strapi service that we can use anywhere in the app. And so we're available to make those calls right here in our content repository, where we see that we're adding our token from our authentication repository where we just talked about saving it off. And so now we've seen how all these pieces work together. And so we're ready for the demo portion of seeing all these come together. And so I can jump over to my app. Now you notice, again, calling back to me being a little late. I did not include all the beautiful images that Craig provided because they were PDFs and I didn't want to convert them over to SVGs. And so here we are on our landing page. We have options to log in, create accounts. Again, echoing to that one, I actually included my information right in the API, right into my source code. And so first thing we're going to do is try to go ahead and skip login. And we get an error message immediately. Oh no, something went wrong. I wonder what it could be. Maybe it's because we're not authenticated. And so now we can go through the login process. And I have already created my account, although it's also available to us. And so we can log into my account that I've already created. And hopefully it works this time. Maybe not. Yikes, so fun. Live coding. I definitely tried this right before we did this today. Not crashing, not doing much of anything.
It's all good.
Does work. Maybe. Oh, I'm not totally sure. That's not happening for me right now. One other thing I did want to call out is that you may notice the very large sign in with Google button. Oh, it did crash now. So that for me. An unexpected error occurred. Excellent. That's what I wanted.
And you're breaking up, so maybe internet as well.
Yeah. Okay. So with that, I am just wrap up. Is available on GitHub, and so I did go ahead and implement the sign-in with Google functionality through Firebase because I never want to create my new accounts. And so if you're interested, it's also very straightforward following our documentation is also available. Yes, big roles with set of Google is the different keys that you need from across the platform ecosystem before in a very similar way everything else we've talked about. So with that, I'll hand it back over to you, Craig.
All right. Sorry about that for everyone. And we're experiencing a little bit of breaking up on her end. So I'm going to finish it up. I'm not going to go over everything she just went through, but I am going to show what I did on the iOS side. And I think you guys will see what she was trying to show is basically the same thing. So I will take over sharing screen. All right. So again, I apologize. Hopefully everyone can see my screen. I should be showing you Strapi in Xcode. And the only difference that I did since you were last seeing my screen is I restarted the server for the actual project that we're using and demoing. So right now, if I go in here and I click login, And for the simplicity of not having to waste your time watching me type, we'll pretend that I put in my account here, my username and my password, and then I hit login. And you can see here that I've successfully logged in. So we know that it works, but I want to kind of go into a little deeper of what I did and how I set up everything. So a lot of this is just the same stuff you're going to do. I didn't actually use Firebase for my login and auth. So what I did it slightly different is the main URL path is localhost. And then we have a register just like we saw earlier, but let's go into that really quick. And you'll see that it's auth local. So this is basically where I get the authentication for the user when they log in and if it's successful or not. So if I go back, you'll see here, I have some static headers that's just for JSON purposes, stuff you've seen. Here I have token headers, which I'll basically inject my header into the token into the header when I'm done. And right here is basically just me giving the identifier so you guys don't have to watch me enter the password each time. And I have just a simple post and a URL session using Data Task Publisher. That's all I'm really doing here. And it's nothing too crazy. And my model is welcome. And if I were to, I can print. So in here using Combine, I can add a print statement. So we can do print here. And we can also do print on a couple of different places. Let's do one here. I had a dump in here and I deleted it. I should have just left it. But let's just do return and return. And I'm going to use my little shortcut there and then do dump $0.data. All right. So I'm going to rerun this and then I'm going to let you see the output window of what happens when I log in successfully. So you can see that I'm not just doing some magic on here. So I'm going to hit login. I get all these little errors. I'm going to clear this out. I'm going to now hit, so I type in my username, I type in my password, I inject it into the header, I hit login, and now it's finished. So here you can see that I received a welcome object, and that welcome object gives me this long key, and then it gives me a user. It tells me who the user is. It gives me their email. It tells me if the provider's local, it's confirmed as true. If it was blocked, I would check that. It tells me their role, as Sierra showed you earlier about roles. And then it tells me what, the name is authenticated, default role given to authenticated users, et cetera, et cetera. So as you can see, everything is working the way we expect. And now with this, I can then inject my JWT into all my calls when I want to make calls to the API, and everything will work together. So this is just a really simple way of explaining and showing you how Strapi works. You can do a ton of different things. I mean, half of the stuff I didn't really get to talk to you guys about, but let's just kind of go through them. GraphQL integration. So if you're used to GraphQL, you can do GraphQL with this. It's a really simple add-on in your terminal, and you can basically have GraphQL. AWS integration, you can have that. So I have a couple of projects that are live where I'm actually using, let me just pull. So this is a client project of mine. And if I go into /admin and then I log in, you'll see here, they have a lot of different things. They have videos. And so here she has images, and then she also has videos. And so all of these are being uploaded. But the thing about it is they're all being uploaded to AWS. So that's another little integration you can add, and you can go into plugins. Claudia had asked if there was a way to export content. There usually is someone who's got a plugin of some sort. So here you can see GraphQL. I could download it and install it here. I already have content manager roles, content type, all of this stuff, library. But basically, I added an AWS plugin to make this work with it. And then like we've already talked about, obviously, Firebase. So those are the main things. And then you have a lot of customizations to do. So in this one, I have my URL is basically just like normal. But in the case of another project I'm working on for my normal job or my daily job, we actually now do v1 / and then the URL path. So here I'm entering the API key so you can see it, but I'm going to delete it so that no one can copy it. And then so now I have v1 story. So if you want to customize the routes and have versions, you can also have that. Strappy's pretty good at responding on Twitter and in the forums. So if you have issues, you can go in there. But as you can see here, that we're using also AWS. So all of these are done. And what's great about Strappy with media is if when you put one image in, it actually makes all of the formats. So here is small, then medium, then thumbnail, and your actual large image. And then it does that for everything that you have for your media. So it's a really good and it's really powerful to be able to have this in your like arsenal for content. And you can do nested. I know my time is up, so I don't want to keep going, but if you have questions, feel free. We will stick around and answer any questions, but hopefully you got a good understanding of how Strappy works and how you can literally get your own APIs up and running without having to have a full-time dev working on it for months just to get it going. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you for attending. Thank you, Sierra, for being the bomb co-host with me. And I guess I'll just leave it at that. If anyone has any questions, I'm not sure if we're supposed to stick around, but I'm going to stay unless they boot me out. Thank you. Thank you, Daisy. No questions. How is there no questions? Come on, somebody give me a question before he leaves. Or Sierra. Thank you, Daniel. I don't know if that's Daniel, the man Daniel, but thank you, Daniel. And then we have Wesley Matthews. Do you, you know, I'm going to ask if he played for the Lakers. How hard is it to actually get started with it? It's just as easy as I showed, actually. Literally just getting terminal set up. I think Sierra could probably answer since she's newer. I've been using Strappy for almost a year now. And I gave her the stuff and she was up and running in a day. Maybe less. I don't know.
Yeah, I was gonna say the hardest part was going and finding like how to install like npm for me and stuff. That part was harder than just the directions for pulling up a Strappy project are well documented and very straightforward once you have everything installed to make those calls.
Yep. I think if you're comfortable with terminal, you'll be fine with it. If you're not comfortable with terminal, it may take you a little more time, but overall, I think it's very easy. And it's good to see you again, Claudia. Anyone else? You guys can open your mic and just ask a question. You don't have to type it unless you don't want to talk. Hello, Madonna. I hope your presentation went well today.
She's still got another one this afternoon.
Oh, she's like a rock star. Oh, it's later. Oh, you were on Twitter. My bad. I saw you were talking, so I thought it was this, but you know, you got like all kinds of like rock star appointments, I guess, online. Anyone else? Questions, comments, concerns? Hopefully we covered as much as we could. Thanks, Christopher, for being here and helping us out.
Welcome. Nice work.
Thanks.